So now that we're done with the modeling in Max, I want to add more refined detail to the model without subdividing more the mesh. So for that I'm gonna use ZBrush with alpha map projections and exporting normal maps and dot maps with ZBrush. I'm gonna use a plugin in ZBrush called ZMapper, allowing me to export those normal maps. But before I can start playing with ZBrush, I'm gonna have to unfold my UVs on that guy. For that I'm gonna use Deep UV. It's a small program that have a really good relax tool, allowing me to have perfect unstretched UVs really quickly. What I'm doing right now is I'm gonna start separating the mesh in two parts, and after that I'm gonna separate all the different parts, the arms, the legs, for the UV and mapping by selecting some faces and assigning different ID channels to those faces. So I first have to check if the mesh have good symmetry and make sure I have a clean selection to separate my mesh. I'm gonna stop there. I'm gonna leave the brain alone for now. I want it to be asymmetrical, so that's gonna be another part. I'm gonna have two parts for the heads, left and right, one part for the brain, wings, arms, and the two legs. And I'm gonna group all the small extremities into one channel ID. That way I'm sure that I optimized the UV canvas as much as possible. So I'm gonna duplicate that part. I'm gonna do some asymmetrical details on the head. That's why I want to keep the symmetry only for the arms and legs, but the whole So I'm gonna start separating parts on that half. Try to have some really clean selections, and I'm gonna give it the ID 3 for that. If the topology is really clean, it's really simple to select all those faces and keep it clean. So just select the extremity until you have a nice loop, and then use grow selections. So I'm gonna do one map for all those small extremities that they have, so that way I can do a really big map and I'm not gonna waste some space, and I have less map to load in Max, so it's gonna be also faster for rendering. So when I'm gonna bring all those parts as one mesh in ZBrush, I will still be allowed to keep all those UV groups and save different maps for each individual group. So looking at the arm right now, I'm making sure the selection is clean. You can just translate the whole thing so you will see right away if there's a problem with your selection, and then hit undo, put it back in place. It's a good way to check if you have one polygon that is not selected. I also use the invert selection, so that way you can see if there's a isolated polygon that you might forget somewhere. So ID 3, I'm assigning different IDs for each part. So I'm looking how I'm gonna separate parts. So now I'm gonna have to unfold the UVs on that guy. That shouldn't be too hard. I'm gonna show you a really simple technique. I'm gonna start with the arm. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select faces on only one side of the arm. So I'm gonna separate this arm, split it in two, and just do a simple projection mapping with a planar projection. So here I'm checking if there's any problem with the selection. So view from camera, fit, and then select invert. So when I select invert, you can see some isolated polygons that I have to fix. So I'm gonna fix those really quick. That should be good now. So view from camera, fit, and then collapsed. Select invert and do the same thing with the other selection. And also for that arm, I'm gonna separate that finger. So I won't have, I'm trying not to have any overlapping in my UVs. So with deep UV you can just select UV groups and just hit the relax tool. It's really simple, and then he's gonna unstretch everything for you. You can also use the lift tool. It's gonna separate any overlapping polygons. Importing back the OBJ from deep UV, and now I'm ready to check with a checker. So you can see that it's perfectly unfold. There's no overlapping right now. So you still have to clean your UVs in Max a little bit. Just make sure you optimize that UV canvas as much as possible. And of course check for any weird things and overlapping, that kind of stuff. I'm gonna scale those down. Try to keep consistent UVs with the size of the arm, the size of the finger compared to the arm. And I'm not worrying about the seam that I'm gonna have to do, because I'm gonna paint all my maps in body paint later, and ZBrush will paint over the seam, so I'm not worrying about that. I'm just trying to have really clean, unstretched UVs with no overlapping. Using the stitch tool just to connect back those small pieces, and so you can see that it's perfectly unstretched UVs ready to paint. Alright, so I'm gonna do basically the same thing with the rest of the body. I'm gonna work on the wing right now, so same process. I'm gonna select only one side of the wing, and I'm gonna do a planar mapping projection on one side, a line from camera, and the same on the other side. Exporting the mesh in OBJ, opening in deep UV, and just separate those two elements and hit relax. And that's it. Save it back, import it back in Max. Now I have to compact those, optimize that UV canvas. And then assign the checker to C, and it's perfect. So now I'm gonna move on another part, just tiling those down so I can see better. And I'm gonna do the same with the small extremities. So for those, I'm not gonna do a face selection. I'm just gonna make a planar mapping on the whole thing, and in deep UV I'm gonna use the lift tool to separate them in two. Opening those up, so you can see I have only one, and when I hit lift, it separates the mesh in two parts, and I just have to hit relax, and it's done. I might have to clean those up in Max just a little bit to make sure everything's fine. So I'm gonna apply an unwrap and just check that there's no overlapping or weird stuff happening. It's pretty clean so far. So that's about all I need to do in Max really to unfold the UVs. Just make sure it's clean, but deep UV is doing 95% of the job. I remember spending hours unfolding UVs before I used that tool, so it's really important part of the pipeline. There's a relax tool in Max, a new relax tool that is also really good, but it's just working much better with deep UV, I think. So just cleaning these UVs really quickly. Make sure everything is nice and clean. Get rid of all the overlapping, and then optimizing the canvas. So that's why I put all those small parts into one group. So as you can see, I can really fun to texture after that. I'm not gonna have to worry about any stretching stuff. So I did the same for the legs. I'm gonna show you quickly the UVs, and I'm gonna show you for the head. For the head, I'm gonna separate in two pieces, two parts, and same process. I'm gonna do planar mapping on those two parts, importing in deep UV, separating the groups, and heat relax. And that's it. So I'm gonna have to check again on the head if the UVs are really clean. Might have to fix a couple stuff, but yeah, so it's pretty good already. I just have to make sure everything is clean with no overlapping, and especially those spikes that he have on his back. So also for that you can use the relax from Max, just selecting the points that have problem and hit relax, so I don't even have to worry about unfolding those. Relaxing that, and here I have to make sure all the borders are not overlapping. It's really important to have really clean UVs. If you start with bad UVs, then you're gonna run into a lot of problems later. So my advice is really to work a lot on the UVs and make sure that they're really clean. And after, it's gonna be really easy to add all the details. I'm gonna separate the inside of the mouth. Just do a separate projection for that, but still keep it in the same. Have to clean the back of his mouth. There's a hole there, so taking care of that. And then just a simple planar projection, and I'm gonna scale this down, relax it a lot. And again, even it's inside of the mouth, I'm still trying to have something pretty clean. So if there's anything happening inside of his mouth, I'm gonna be sure that the map is gonna hold up. Compacting those in the canvas. And when I'm doing that, I try not to deform the UVs too much when I'm scaling down, so that way I'm sure it's not gonna stretch. So you can see it's really clean. Really makes you want to start painting. So the body, same thing. I'm gonna select the top half. So it's pretty clean, and apply planar projection mapping. Select invert. Same thing. Exporting to deep UV. And hit relax. Importing back in max. Also that way, every time I import one part, I can rename it properly. So I'm sure I can keep my file clean. And I'm just gonna relax all those spike parts, or clean them really quickly. This don't need to be really precise, but as long as there's no overlapping, it's fine. Compacting those. There's gonna be a little bit of waste on that UV. You can see there's a lot of holes, but that's okay. So always going through the whole UV and checking for eventual problems. Avoiding surprises for later. So even though the mesh is really complex and there's a lot of details, it's just really simple to unfold the UVs. It's gonna take me a few hours, and I'm gonna be done with that. So Deep UV is really good software, and I'm using it only for that, only to unfold the UVs. You can also run the relax a few times in Deep UV if you want to relax it one. The UV is done. I'm gonna reapply the symmetry. And the only part left, it's gonna be the brain. So for the brain, I have to make a selection that's gonna work with both sides of the model. Because it's asymmetrical, I have to make sure that I can sew it back later. I'm gonna detach it for now, but I have to make sure that it's gonna match both sides of the head. So right now, the selection for that. So I'm gonna use the X-ray vision on the brain, and you can see the symmetrical left part of the head under it. So I just gonna have to make sure I delete all those faces and keep only the brain part. So you can see that it's not perfectly matching, but it's good enough to come later and attach it back. I'm almost done with that. Just double checking. Get rid of the last polygons that are still there. And that's it. So just have to unfold the UVs on that guy and I'm done. All the eyes and canister and all the small details, I'm gonna unfold them only when I'm gonna start mapping the character. I don't need that right now for the ZBrush pass. I just need the body to have some nice UVs. So same thing, planar projection, exporting in OBJ and relaxing it in Deep UV, importing back, renaming, get rid of the old one, double checking for the overlapping, and then try to get the best out of it, fit in the square, and I'm gonna check with the checker map. So seems pretty good. There's no stretching at all, so I'm really confident now to start painting in ZBrush. Checking the symmetry again. Always good to check with a mesh mousse if the symmetry is working well. And I'm gonna make sure that junction is really flat, so that way the symmetry is gonna be really clean. Yeah, so it's working much better now. So you can see I have all the UVs unfold, and I still have all my groups. I just need to make sure that the IDs are consistent. So just double checking every part. Make sure the symmetry is working. And checking with mesh mousse for any problems. So I'm gonna rename the IDs on that half, 3 and 4. So yeah, right now you can see he's ready to start painting in ZBrush. So I'm gonna get rid of all the symmetrical parts and keep them as unique, so I won't have to paint it twice in ZBrush. I'm just gonna have to detach that art. You can switch the UV selection to face selection. So as I'm doing now, I switch to face selection and then collapse it, and then I can change the map channel and make sure they have the right order. I'm gonna have the two sides of the head, and then the brain, and then the wing, the arm, the legs, extremities. Transferring to face selection, collapse that. You can either collapse or put edit poly on top and just change the map channel. Either way is fine. So in your unwrap UVs, if you hit the plus on your keyboard, it's gonna extend the selection, just like the grow. So I'm just selecting some of the part, and then I hit plus, and Mac's gonna select the rest of the verts. So you can see I'm really careful. It's important to double check everything before you start painting in ZBrush. I usually also make a test, opening ZBrush, painting something really quickly, and then exporting the maps just to see if the pipeline is clean and if everything is going through. And once you double checked everything, you can start really having fun and paint in ZBrush. So the last thing I'm gonna do before I start in ZBrush is I'm gonna extend. Right now all the UVs are overlapping each other. Every part is at the same spot in the UV canvas. So what you can do is just put an unwrap modifier on top, and then edit it, and in the options on the side you have extend or expand, sorry, UVs. So you can see he's using one canvas for each part. So you can see now all the UVs are really clean and we're ready to start painting.